Hi, is my voice audible?
Yep,
Yep.
loud and clear.
Cool. Hi everyone. As usual, we're going to have the tradition of introducing every single panels of judges that's going to be judging both the novice and the open grand finals one by one. So yeah, let's just start on the introductions. So the first panel of judge that's going to judge the novice grand final rounds is Albert Ong from Universitas Diponegoro. He's the invited judge of NSDC Lampung 2025, best independent judge and open grand finals judge of Smash 2024, invited judge of LDBI Kepulauan Riau, grand finalist of Tradition 3.0, as well as the gold medalist and top 5 best speaker of LDBI 2022. The second panel of judge that's going to be also paneling this round is Alvin Tanady from Universitas Prima Indonesia. He's the grand final chair of Cebu Pro Ams 2025. He's also a part of the grand final panel of BAC Malaysia Pre-NUDC 2025, as well as the grand final panel of IVET 2023. The third panel that's also going to be judging this round is Arilynn Wijaya from University of Technology Sydney. They're the CAP of Indonesian Women and Gender Minorities AP 2025, CAP of UIDC AP 2025, Katolistiwa Debate Championship 2025 Open Grand Finalist, as well as the overall Best Speaker, also the quarterfinalist of Pro M 2025, and a part of Team Indonesia Serbia World Schools Debating Championship 2024, where they ended up as an octo-finalist and Best EFL team. Continuing on, we have Regina Stephanie Wisana from Universitas Bina Nusantara, who is the co-10th Best Speaker of WGM 2025, first runner-up and 8th Best Speaker of HBP 2024, top 8th Best N1 Adjudicator of NUDC 2024, and invited judge of a lot of different competitions, such as IVET 2024, NOVED 2024, IVET 2025, Malaysia Junior Schools WSDC 2025, UBC Summer HST 2025. Continuing on, we have Theresa Angelica Hartono, also one of the institutional judges for this competition from Universitas Udayana. Grand finalist and runner-up of UGM Eloquentia Pre-NUDC, open quarterfinalist of Borlino Debate Open, champion of AKIUM, school semifinal panel of Indonesia Pro Ams, as well as junior grand finals chair of Malaysia Debaters WSDC. And if I'm not wrong, lastly, we're going to have Vinay Tekani from Universitas Katolik Indonesia Atmajaya Jakarta, the EFL finalist of Vietnam WDC 2024 and Malaysia ABP 2023, overall best speaker of IVET 2025, CAP of NUDC 2025 Regionals, IVET 2024 at Open 2024, as well as overall best judge of Damalira 2025. And so with that, we're going to introduce the Novice Grand Finals chair for NOVED 2025, Christopher Tjia from Universitas Sanata Dharma, with the following accomplishments. First, champion of Cakrawala Debat Terbuka 2024, overall best judge of NOVED 2024, runner-up of Depot Open 2023, as well as the second runner-up of Argumentum Agents 2024. Amazing panels and amazing chair too. They're going to be the one leading this round and going to be the one that's moderating for the results. So yeah, with that, in 1 minute, we're going to start the debate. I'm going to just give the floor later to Tjia or Andre. Good luck, everyone.
Okay, check. Hi everyone. Am I audible and visible? Yep. Okay. Before that, let's do a quick roll call for all the grand finalists. For OG, are you here?
OG here.
Yep. OO.
We're here.
All right. CG.
Here.
CO.
Here.
All right. So for the panelists, Tere, are you here?
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. Theresa, are you here?
Here.
Okay. Vinay.
Here.
Okay. Ari.
Here.
Regina.
Here.
Alvin.
Yup, here.
Yeah. Albert.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so hi everyone, welcome to the Grand Final, Novice Grand Final round of NOVED 2025. My name is Tjia, I'll be the judge for this round. Judging with me will be my amazing panels that are Tere, Vinay, Ari, Regina, Alvin, and also Albert. Before we start, congratulations for all teams for making it this far. We're going to talk about post-conflict states implementing mixed race housing policies. Without further ado, I'd like to call upon PM to start. Here. Okay, thank you. Next, call upon Hello.
Nggak, maksudnya gue argumen gue tuh bawa argumen gue sendiri. Cuman gue tuh udah maksud gue
Oji, sorry, you are not muted. Okay, Oo.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Wait. I'll set my timer. Yeah. For your eye preference, just unmute yourself. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We acknowledge the benefit or like whatever the government team are trying to say in this debate, but here is, I'm going to just tell you a simple questions that will basically are going to be break down all of their arguments. Is that one simple question: do we actually really needed this like house mixed race policy in the very first place? The answer is no. But then before that, several rebuttal for the government team is that firstly they say that they want to like promote equality, or like they saying that they want this to actually just like want to belonging for like society, for like society to be belonging to each other, for like having a neighborhood, or like having like a social life from the very first place. But I think that there is a lot of things. I think that these arguments is not very exclusive from the very first place, because this kind of thing, if your goal are just basically wanted to like making people to be like social people from the very first place, I think that there are a lot of things that we can do to actually maintain society, not only just like basically just giving them for like a house just for like them from the very first place. But then they're also talking about healthcare. But I think that we are going to be talking more about this for like my argument later on. But then let's take a look on how this debate actually going from the government team. It's like they lack on something on how this debate are actually framing their role. They are failing to like actually giving you like the mechanism, or like giving you a clear imagination on how actually their type of role are going to be happening in their side of the world, right? Because I think in this type of motion, the government, basically like the crucial things that the government team need to do is like how we have to like actually knowing why this is really urgent to actually basically for like the post-conflict state to actually just like implement this. First thing when they are like actually that knowing understand that this is that we are talking about is actually a post-conflict state from the very first place. We are not basically just talking like a random country that basically just like having some kind of small problem. We are talking about a post-conflict state from the very first place. That is why we think that I think that the stance that opening opposition are trying to say in here is like very simple, that I think that it is not really necessary or like really that urgent to actually for this post-conflict states to actually like implement this like first thing first when they are like just for the sake of the country. Let's take a look on how this post-conflict state situation are currently stated in this motions. I think that regarding on their situations are not really much needed nor prioritized to like making or like implement these mixed race housing policies in the very first place. I think that we notice that in this type of things, when we're talking about post-conflict states, we think that their country are just recover from like a tension or like a war, like what. But the question is that what would we firstly need to do like in this type of situation? Firstly, from the opening opposition, I think that the people in that country is firstly need like a stability. People need to be like healed from the trauma first. But then secondly, we already saying before that this is not really much urgent to actually implementing a household situation in this very situation. And even though if government team can really giving you like the mechanism on how this is actually going to be happen in their type of world, what are the benefit? I think that by the way, they are not really giving us the real like benefit on how this is actually going to be happen in their side of the world. I think that this is not really much needed from the very place, because we first thing first we need is that stability, and like people need to be healed from the trauma of first love. I think that as an opening opposition, we are going to prove to you on how this is not really urgent to begin with, and also there are a lot of things that can be done rather than government implementing this household thing for this mixed house from the very first place. First, my argument: people need to heal from the trauma. Giving a household are only gonna make them feel like okay, feel them like run away from their trauma, or like making it better just like instantly. I think this is bad. What we need is a stability. We need to make two people to like stable first, like healing from their trauma, like making other things to make them feel like okay, we're fine now. Then we could implement this later, because this is not prioritized from the very place. I think that this debate is talking about the time when we actually going to effectively implement this from the very first place. But I think that this is not really urgent to actually implement this too. But then uh let's take a look. Like the analogy is like when we are like resetting the country, like moving into like a new planet. Imagining it like that, rather than making a new house or like other, we need to be like stable and calm. We need to like making sure that we're okay. We need to like making other things from the very place, rather than we have to like prioritize something that are primary things, for example like food or like health from the very place. That is why when the government team are like arguing that household can make people are like safe from disease or like making them health, I think that why are we not implementing health from the very first place? I think that taking care of the people that are probably sick or something like that, I think these are going to be like making a good type of good movement for like the government to actually taking care of the people first, the primary thing that they need from like healing from this thing from the very first place, rather than we implementing this kind of things. But then I think that when we actually like giving this type of household, this will make people to like more traumatic, because it will like, hey, I think we already already like post already like becoming like post conflict and etc. This will make people like more traumatic, because the house that they built, the house that they are living in, will reminds them to like the story that behind that building. Oh my god, the government like building this house to actually making us more better, when actually it is going to be like remembering to them to like the story behind them. So I think this is going to be bad for them. But then secondly, my second argument: post conflict states need to be like making like a good relationship to both the country that before facing like a war or a tension first from the very first place. So before we acting that, oh my god, I think we are okay, we are going to be giving you the people a present for like house, for example, this is going to be like making people like think that we're okay, while actually there are a lot of problems that actually need to be fixed first before like we actually giving making this kind of implementing from the very first place, like right? I think that they need to like fixing or like maintain the relationship between like the countries between them, like when they are facing this conflict first, rather than like we have to, or rather than we acting like as if everything is already okay from the very first place before we made this. So I think that I think that what I'm already saying, what I'm stated in here, is actually like already breaking down all of the government team arguments, because I think that it is not really much needed from the very first place for both the internal of the people inside the country and for like the external relationship between the country itself. I think that it is not really much needed, and they cannot even giving us like a real stating on how this is actually really needed, or like how this is actually are going to be beneficial for the country itself. Very proud to be speaking in the grand final.
Okay, thank you. Next, I call upon DPM. Yeah. Hello, DPM.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, audible.
All right, first and foremost, POI preference is to unmute. And I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. First and foremost, I would like to do a few rebuttals. OO asked the question, do we need this policy? And I will elaborate my argument to explain why this policy is needed. And then OO also argues that we focus too much on social people, and that social people can be done in several ways, that social people can be achieved in several ways. Firstly, we don't prioritize socialization. We are arguing that integration is the core. We need to stop, we need to be able to find a way where the people can assimilate, where cultures can assimilate. We need to coexist. And they also further argue about post-conflict states. We think that it is most important due to the fact that it is a post-conflict state, because post-conflict states tend to be racially sensitive to other races. They also argue about stability and trauma, but this motion doesn't urge anyone to move. It offers discounts. This doesn't disrupt any lives. This is not relevant to stability. Stability can still be achieved while also integrating change. The core component of integration is that it's a gradual process. This is not an instant process that takes place within one night to disrupt stability. And they also argue about how it leads to more trauma. OO is insinuating that cultural diversity is a traumatic issue and fails to elaborate how. I don't see where in OO's argument that they have deliberately say how this trauma can be formed through this housing policy of integrating race. What part of diversity leads to trauma? This is precisely the mindset we do not want to exist in a post-conflict state. And we would argue that can be helped by integration of race. And I will now go into my argument. First and foremost, again, I would like to repeat my first speaker's contextualization that the interest of the state is to have no conflict, to have less of a housing crisis. They want civilians to be housed. And the interest of the people is harmony and anti-hegemony and safety. Now, onto my first argument that what is important here is harmony within the people. The mixed race housing is beneficial for both actors of the motion, both the state and the people. The little people in this motion are the civilians, as the OO has agreed. What are the issues of civilians? Again, I've mentioned before, is hegemony or superiority between race. It was Edward Said who mentioned in his book about Orientalism that harmony will only exist when hegemony is eradicated. Rather than the clash of civilization, we need to concentrate on working together on culture and understanding. Only through understanding each other can we eliminate racial discrimination. This is what Edward Said was trying to say. This is extremely relevant in post-conflict state. In a post-conflict state, racial discrimination is prevalent. Like I've mentioned before in my rebuttal, that a post-conflict state, racial discrimination is prevalent. Therefore, it is very much within the interest of the state to advocate for harmony and integration of race, as I've mentioned before, in the interest of the states. This policy incentivizes the idea of integration, of harmony, that through the mixed house policy, civilians will be housed and racially integrate. They will live, they will coexist with each other, they will learn from each other, they will communicate, they will be able to see each other as something not so much different from themselves, which is what we are trying to advocate for. Through integration, neighbors will be able to coexist and further understand each other, leading to a world without hegemony and with harmony. Now, let's look at what happens in the status quo, which is failure to assimilate. In post-conflict states, what tends to happen is that race group tends to cluster into one area. This creates exclusivity and discrimination. This is extremely dangerous, as we see in history. This can lead to disastrous results and violence and further stereotyping. These are all very, very real case of what will happen in a post-conflict state if racial harmony, if like this diversity is not approached in an integrating way, where racial violence will occur, where stereotyping, where hate crimes, where all of this obviously very, very problematic things will happen. This can cost lives, as we see in America's Black Lives Matter movement. This is a very good example of what a post-conflict state would look like if integration is not prioritized. They don't assimilate to each other. The people of the white community tends to cluster in their own residential area, and there will be an area for people of colors, and they tend to not interact with each other, and they tend to create this scenarios of hate. This is not what is within the interest of the people, as before we have agreed on, being the people is most important in the scenario. I also want to argue about how multicultural diversity is important, and it is not only important for harmony, but also for advances in knowledge. We need to share and learn from others to improve our knowledge. Look at it like filling gaps. There's so much we can learn from traditions, even our own. Japanese fabric making techniques could be the missing piece to maybe Minangese fashion. Even in ideology, we can complete each other. Japan's idea of wabi-sabi could be the solution to Indonesia's overconsumption problem. It is important for us to understand each other and learn about each other to advance knowledge. And that is why we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I call upon DLO to close the opening half.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep.
Thank you. If you have any POI, please just unmute or raise your hand. And wait 1 second. Forgot to. I'll use my phone. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two clarifications I'd like to do first. Number one is regarding the motion itself. We completely understand that this is like a value judgment motion, which means that the government absolutely does have the fiat to actually like enact the post-conflict states, whether it wants to implement the mixed race housing policies or not. And what opening opposition will be debating about is regarding how of the bad effects and consequences that can come from this, of the possibilities. And number two is regarding how opening opposition doesn't argue for things like segregation and things that are closer to apartheid, or how people want to not interact with one another in post-conflict states. But we want to do that is essentially that the reason why we oppose this motion is because there might be some unintended consequences and possible harms coming both towards the state itself, but also towards the ethnic groups or like economic classes that might happen because this is a post-conflict state. So two things I like to explain in my setup regarding post-conflict states itself. Usually in post-conflict states, ethnic or racial, even economic conflicts itself that after came out of those type of countries that came out after those type of conflicts usually creates like an insurmountable amount of instability. And usually this lowers government legitimacy, and this will also hinder like their upcoming structural changes that they want to make in the country to make the country better. But this also creates like trauma, mostly depending on how long the conflict itself. The trauma becomes intergenerational, which means like it's very bad and it's very hard to destigmatize that trauma itself because it's intergenerational. So essentially, another part I'd like to explain my setup is what are the prerequisites for post-conflict states to actually enact and commence structural policies and for them to be successful. Two things. Number one is stability, which is going to be hindered by usually by racial tensions, micro conflicts, and distrust coming from the intergenerational trauma that I've mentioned before. But number two is regarding legitimacy. People's and the general public trust towards the government itself, and also their value towards the government itself, that they want to actually be and live in in the state itself, even though it's post-conflict, and also things like nationalism. So then our argument and our stance here is very simple. Our argument is mixed race housing inhibits and crowds out other methods of integration policies. So we're not trying to argue for the segregation and also like apartheidism. We want people to better enact and like have a certain amount of proximity to each other. But because the motion debates about post-conflict states, we need to be really careful with our integration policies, and mixed race housing is not the policy to go. So first thing I'd like to explain here is regarding post-conflict states, how it depends on the time frame, intergenerational mistrust and also trauma develops. Even if it's short, it can still accrue, and people can still have like the trauma itself wouldn't be intergenerational, but it would still be very fresh, and people still would like very much remember all the bad things that they've done to each other, essentially. So how long for these two groups to reconcile and basically try to want to live together in a post-conflict state is the utmost important goal for said conflicts, for said post-conflict state, because daily interactions, even like daily interaction itself, can lead to unwanted consequences because of people's already pre-existing distrust and hatred. Things like how much of my neighbor that is like before coming out of post-conflict state, we like kill each other because he's a certain ethnic group, and also like because I have a certain distrust, even if they were too loud in their own home or something like that, and because of their proximity is too close, it can even lead to like higher and even bigger unwanted consequences. And you can basically make the key takeaway here is you can even make like small complaints evolve to higher and higher conflicts. And we can see this with like the past experience in Indonesia itself, between like the conflict between Madura and the Dayak, for example, which is something that evolved from something relatively small, and it became like an ethnic conflict where where like sacrifices happen and also deaths that happen in both sides. So how will the state be perceived is also like a good metric to be accounted for in this debate, because the states who are the intermediaries could be seen as illegitimate because of the unintended consequences from mixed race housing policies. What I want to say here is that forcing certain ethnic groups who, in this case, who probably suffered the most losses from the conflict itself, will potentially feel humiliated because they have to like because the government is like giving them choices, to giving them like extra provisions towards, because the government wants them to live with the majority or something like that, with like having to live with people who they perceive before as enemies and have like higher distrust towards them. And this would be less legitimacy coming towards the state. And this is a bad thing, like I said in my setup, because you need to have state legitimacy if you want to enact further structural changes for your country to be better. So this can also cause harm in other ways. Like Elma already told you, that post-conflict states usually aren't the most stable. They usually don't have full control of their country. More often than not, like the Rwanda, for example, one of the fringe groups, or one of the group's militaries, for example, the one that caused the Rwandan genocide, still exists to an extent. And in post-conflict states, when you try to enact mixed race housing policies, it can be a way for those said like fringe military groups to take advantage of the policies and try to enact further harm, and further causing further harm towards the houses, and also the lingkungan, and also the environment. So what we are trying to talk here is that there are certain better alternatives, things like focus reconciliation projects and also joint ventures. When I talk about focus reconciliation projects, I mean like things where we should focus on amending the scars and also fixing the trauma, the intergenerational trauma that develop over time from a long period of time, depending on the conflict itself, through maybe like educational basis towards how they would be taught towards in school, etc. And also regarding reparations, which is like very important. And the reason why this becomes unlikely or a problem, and because it gets crowded out due to the importance of integration policies, mixed race housing that is enacted by the state. I guess like, I mean, they already have fiat to enact that policy, but I would argue that because of the enactment of the government towards mixed race housing, some other methods are going to be crowded out, like I said before, like reparations and also educational basis. And another like likely counterfactual that can be used rather than mixed race housing is mixed race, but not, it doesn't have to be housing. Things like joint ventures, like economics and education itself. Joint mixed race national sports team, I think, is also a better alternative, because national sports teams are really good. We make minority and also like racial groups who were killing each other before, giving the spotlight that they can actually work together, representing the state, and also because we protect minorities through attaching the identities of minorities with the national identity of the state itself. So that's all for me. Proud to.
All right, thank you. To close the closing half, I call upon government member.
All right.
All right, you may continue.
Okay, hold on. Yep. POI preference unmute. Pronounce him. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think there's a very lack of analysis coming from OG on why eventually like resentment and yeah, all that distrust will happen in minority and majority, and we like no suddenly suddenly being burst out like in the government side of the house. But before that, moving to rebuttal, right? First, talking about stability, stability is the more important. Notice that for OO, when you mix these people, it's prevent more social tension building up by bubbling them together in a certain phase without a check and balance in their view, right? Notice that you make the very still fresh memory ingrained deep in their memory, and there's no check and balance regarding their kid growing up, and we will be shown to the hatred of their parents of all those things, and therefore it's very very unlikely for you to have a stability in your side compared to ours. There's more better stability because you live in the same area and there's more check and balance. But two, talking about trauma, notice that there's a certain psychological principle in healing trauma called exposure therapy. Notice that how this exposure therapy works. It works by slowly expose you to expose those that getting traumatized to the stimulus that actually traumatize them, right? By placing them in their home, you slowly helping them to prevent and erase the intergenerational trauma. Their kid will slowly grow up with the understanding of others and not like being brainwashed into the hatred. But several important framing to outframe the opening bench of the debate. Notice first that the stack of that have conflict have three main reason. First, it's either economic. Second, it's social. But third is political. There's neither side of the opening bench that actually explain the three of this. So we'll be the only bench. We will the only team that explain and talk about this. But there's very important urgency to integrate these techniques that live in the same state. But second, notice that the prerequisite of this motion is that the state to acknowledge that a certain minority, a non-majority group exists, and that integration to prevent further conflict. That's already good in the motion itself, compared to the opposition side. But three, notice that the ultimate exclusive benefit of mixed living incentive compared to other initiative is that you help people to see each other in their daily lives, to interact with their neighbors, to have the chance to get invited to each other birthday party, to know each other firsthand, and to collaborate with others and know each other kids growing up. This is build a better emotional bonds and build a better intercultural understanding, and which is lessen the distrust in government by discouraging by the discourse that actually happening between the majority and minority group. And this is will list this is well impact and better view for the government. Notice that four, there's hardly any natural incentive outside of this to make this mixed residential living to move themselves beside this motion. There's will be depolarization in the long run in the opening set of the debate. But first talking about talking about the help, my first argument, talking about how soften and calm the social tension, because there's three things that actually reason of the conflict state. First is social, second is economical, third is political. First, talking about how soften and calm the social tension. Notice that there will be intergenerational tolerance out of this very conflict. In first conflict state will often experience a shift in how housing and residential looks like, people being relocated, people being evacuation, and etc. Notice that it could lead to certain area being concentrated with a certain ethnic group, right? The mixed race housing policies will actually help create a balanced number of different people with different background in this residence. This is very important because area with one dominant ethnic will tend to create a prejudice and stigma toward other ethnic that still very have some fresh wounds or other ethnic that offset them. If any other ethnic more into that area, it will lead to a discrimination toward them. When we have an equal number of different ethnics, when we have a certain quota, when we as the government of the legitimate government have this policy, it will help them integrate the community and have move better a check and balance toward the stigma that actually caused the conflict in the very first place. But what is the incentive for the majority to actually accept the minority? Notice that they are already in the post-conflict state. There's already some stigma and resentment, but there's actually two reasons why would they accept the minority in the residential. Because they're actually incentive to integrate the minority into their worldview, because they want to know actually what is happening in the other side of the debate. They want to actually know what is the other thing, the other people, and they want actually to know to integrate this minority in their worldview to maybe just want to talk with each other. This is very human. But B, because there's this benefit that being offered, such as more funding for the complex, better public access for the community. And this is very good and very, very better for them in the post conflict states that actually still have kesusahan in terms of economic. But moving into economic argument, this is never being explained by the either set of opening bench. Notice that this is will like in our motion, it will likely result in a better economic collaboration. Notice in residential area, you not only live there, but you also open business, you also open shops, you also open market there, and this is very likely for people to hire people and actually work together in people in the residential area in this shop based on the residential place, because it is more easier to them to check on them, easier to them to make a collaboration to make them daily, for example. And this share economic benefit, better share economic benefit, result in better economic projects. This result into impact. First, there will be lessen economic inequality and lessen prejudice from the minority after all, because majority is always at economic disadvantage. So minority will have less reason to reason because they actually share the economic benefit now. But it's also provide the majority with the unique blend of minority ethnic in doing business. This look like when you are a Malaysian, but you have Indian worker, you actually have this unique blend, and competitiveness compared to other maybe like the only Malays worker, for example. But yeah, moving the political side of the argument, and this is never being truly explained by either side of the opening bench. Notice that by this integration, it will prevent extreme political representation. How this looks like? Notice that the people that have political power, such as like member of the legislative, member of the high table, have high role, significant role in creating this conflict in the first place. This looks like the Sahroni remarks, or maybe the PM remarks in the Nepal, because and notice that they are being chosen by winning in a certain district and winning a certain constituent. By integrating and creating this mixed housing, you prevent extreme political representation by two impacts. First, you enable a discourse happening in the residential area. And notice why the stigma won't prevent them. In the residential area, you meet people every day, you collaborate in community works, there will be less stigma, there will be eventually less stigma, and there will be a discourse that actually make check and balance. But B, there will be check and balance, more check and balance for people in the best area of this potentially extreme politician. This is important because it's harder for the politician to outframe them by blaming them, but this is not my constituent and other, but for all that, there was a reason proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. To open CEO, member.
Hello, judges. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right, first thing first, anything that I'm going to say here just for the sake of debate, because this is sensitive topics, because it's talking about big phrases or whatsoever. And my PO phrases, just unmute. Wait, let me raise my case. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, what's lacking in government benches is that they doesn't see the future ahead. They doesn't offer the solution about the potential harm that already bring up by the opening opposition. With this, government benches loses to respond to cases from opening government. Their premise are very simple, judges. First, if we oppose the motion, they said that then the segregation will happen, and the states has mandate to not do that and enforce reconciliation. Judges understand that the segregation is needed anyway, and the segregation is not a bad thing simply because they are in a post-conflict state. It means that even though the war is over, the conflict is over, doesn't mean the tension is over too. And that is a problem, and the government doesn't answer in their cases. Because we need to find another solution on how we fix their problems, on how to rebuild and restructure and reconstruction their place, for example, the landmarks, for example, or the social construct, for example, to maintain peace for them first, to loosening the situation between each other first. And government doesn't give any solution into this probability that may happen in the future because of this regulation implemented makes rest housing policies. Since notice that OG said enforce means that you're forcing them, right? Therefore, what we need is that the community recovering from conflict, they need space to rebuild their social fabric at their own pace, just not by forcing them. The mandate that the state is needed to do is that to make wise decision into certain problems. And if your decision is not wise, it's like throwing oil on the fire, and that's what happening if we agree into the motion. Second, they said integration is the core. Judges understand that the prerequisite for you to unit them into residential areas is to know that if they are agreed with that kind of offer at the first place, not making into policies that initiative by government just for the sake of promoting racial or ethnic integration in rural areas, for example. But you need to see the factual social embrace that exists in the status quo, that exists in the current situation. That's why you ask government when making policies, making sure to research first into the areas that you're going to make the policies, right? Not only by for the sake of promoting that exists in the context like judges. So the integration argumentation from OG are just that because you need to explain that this makes us raise a great at the very first place. Moving on to closing government, they said that erasing intergenerational trauma. Well, judges, this is going to be achievable if the environment in the states it's been fixed. It's been fixed at the very first place. It's been clear, or the social tensions are already over. But the fact is, it takes years. It takes a lot of time. It takes decades, right? And it is not going to erase the trauma simply because you can't remove the history of your tribes or for example, right, means that the trauma still exists anyway, even if you're trying to erase because it's written in the books of your tribes or race or your family, for example. You can't erase intergenerational trauma. You just can reduce them at this point anyway. Moving on to my three setups. Judges understand that our opening opposition has explained to you very well about the characteristic, about the contextualization, about the motion, and the potential harm that causes if we implemented this idea or regulation. Therefore, because the lacking in the government benches, they doesn't deserve to win this debate and an opposition win. Moving on to 3 point of setup. Judges firstly wish this house in this bill. We believe that this is the state's right. Principally, a state's and the nation interest is to achieve peace in their region, domestic geographical peace and stability and longevity for its people in the nation. So that the interest of country is to avoid internal conflict in its country, right? Because the easiest thing to instigate is in internal conflict and problems, such as problem between tribes and between human living across the island. And mixed race means that they are generally have different belief within each other, different mindset, different lifestyle, different point of view on how they're facing the post-conflict, for example. One may be still say that the conflict the conflict isn't over, even though the state said that it's over and no more fighting whatsoever. Even if the regulation is so strong, anyone still break the law anyway, right, judges? So with this kind of characteristic, it's hard to fight. It's hard to avoid the tension between its other race. And now you are trying to unite them in one residency. Damn, it's naive and not wise decision. Secondly, this house builds the motion. Therefore, we need to approve it that why it will produce more better impact rather than proving the likelihood of it. And the causes of the potential harm that because of the regulation or this initiative from the government implemented into the society. Thirdly, in the status quo, judges, how we see most nations after the post-conflict. Even though the war has ended or the conflict has ended, for example, there is still a bad blood left after the conflict between those races, which means that it is not completely peaceful because there are still people who doesn't accept it anyway. Quote unquote, people still doesn't accept the reality that there are still people that doesn't accept result of the conflict because they suffer a lot of losers, for example, like they are the victim here, for example, their families are dead, their siblings are dead, and so on and so forth. Means that they still have the grasp of the situation, right? And this is the real cases, judges. Moving on to my argumentation. First mixed race housing policies in post-conflict states often do more potential harm than good by increasing social tension and undermining fragile peace. In place, recovering from violence, people still carry deep wounds and mistrust because the conflict, even though it's over, doesn't mean that it's individual that happens to experience that kind of conflict feels okay. Forcing them to live side by side before they're ready to feel unsafe and uncomfortable, which can actually increase the tension instead of easing it, right? It means that there will be another conflict. Right now, many post-conflict communities live separately, not because they want to be divided or whatsoever, but because being close to family people gives them a sense of security. While the separation is not perfect, it often helps keep the peace, right? Suddenly mixing everyone together without building trust first can upset this fragile balance and causes resentment, right? When the government pushes mixed housing too quickly, it's like asking people to share a home with strangers they don't trust yet, judges, without honest conversation, healing, and understanding. Just living next door doesn't magically create friendship, judges. Instead, it can make people feel more isolated and defensive at this point, which can lead into the conflict. On top of that, forcing mixed housing, it actually takes money and energy, a lot of things that it takes after posing conflicts, right? Like important efforts that helping community talk to each other, seek justice, and reboot their economies that exist and that the government has already explained anyway. If we rush this process, there's a real danger that the tension will flare out again, putting peace and stability at risk. But I've told you, right, that the interest of the state is to seek peace and stability, right? So the potential harm causes much bigger and domino effects. First, political backlashes to the government and states because unwise decision regulation created by the government. Second, fragmentation with neighborhood and the society. So with all of this argumentation is still aligned with the interests of government. So if you want to make your own policies, if just at this point, just do your own policies if the conflict is already over, even after the post-conflict. So for government benches to plan either at the opening or closing, they need to offer the solution with the real cases. With being said, proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for up member. Now to conclude the government's case, I call upon the government whip.
Tess, am I audible?
Yeah, audible.
Okay, give me 1 second. If you want to POI, you can just unmute because I will not be looking at the chat. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Areas that have just experienced conflict are so prone to more discrimination. That's why we need to keep a balanced environment with equal quotas. Notice how it's easy for these conflict areas to put the blame on one ethnic group because they think that group is responsible or they become the scapegoat in whatever happens. Like, for example, let's say like the Chinese-Indonesian in the 1998 conflicts. The sentiment and hate will last for years because going to be stuck in their own bubbles after these conflicts, with people being discriminative towards those ethnic minority groups. As my first speaker explained, they will learn to live beside other groups instead and learn that they aren't these bad people that they originally claimed to be, and will lead to long-term exposure. And long-term exposure will lead to acceptance and community. Let's kick out every team out of this debate. First of all, let's talk about OG. Their arguments are flat without any mechanization or step-by-step process and how your arguments will actually work. You talk about how people will receive equal opportunity with mixed housing policies, and people will get better healthcare, less crime, etc. But you don't actually explain how simply housing them together will actually give them all these opportunities. Your arguments are general without hitting the root cause of these post-conflict states compared to our side. How they can lead into such these discriminations, and compared to us who actually give you a reason beyond building community, we're literally protecting ethnic minorities from long-term discrimination. And in social-wise, we prevent generational hate towards these minority ethnic groups in the first place, because when they live around these people who are different from them, then they will learn to be more tolerant, more open. They will learn to work together, especially in issues in economic scopes, like as my first speaker explained, as well as politics as well. And we have brought the prerequisite in the beginning that these majority groups will be more accepting in the end towards these minorities. OG that fails to do so. Okay, second of all, let's talk about OO. I can't help but think that every argument they brought is just very discriminative. You say how people need to heal from the trauma inflicted on them from the conflict, and with this housing system, you would focus on providing things for the people such as food, health, and how they will probably be more uncomfortable or unsafe with these mixed housings. Okay, but you give no explicit explanation why this would be happen better. Why would this be better on your side? On contrary, shouldn't post-conflict states try to heal not only economically but also socially? If you think these housings will make people uncomfortable because like they're living in the same area with other ethnic groups, with minority ethnic groups, that means you want to encourage the stigma and generational discrimination toward these ethnic groups to continue. You're insinuating that people who experience the conflict in the States are going to hate other ethnics because of the conflict, and instead of you trying to prevent continuing these hate or discrimination, you want to let these people continue hating by letting them have separate housings. You're making it as if these mixed housing policies are going to be horrible with poor case and these with poor care. People have lost their houses in these conflicts. They need to be relocated. This is how they end up being housed with other ethnic groups with the mixed house policy. Yes, we will need to focus on we will need to focus on their food and health, but we can't give them all of that without a roof over their heads first and foremost. I think if the government doesn't give them a houses first and foremost, gives them that safe space, giving them the new houses, that could actually ruin their legitimacy more, like you tried to say. And like if you're talking about like there's going to be other joints such as like education through sports groups, we're literally busy repairing a country that has just experienced conflict. You'll be stuck with, because when you only see them like once or twice or just like not every single day, you'll be stuck with to believe what you want to know. And when you are and like these joint ventures and sports teams, they're not going to be the least of your concerns anyways. And like there's only going to be occasional encounters, and it will not actually get rid of the stigma and prejudice towards these groups in the end. Okay, moving on to CO. They talk about how this mixed housing policy will actually be forcing these people to forcing them to rebuild their lives after they've just been traumatized because of the conflict. We don't understand how we are quote unquote forcing these people to rebuild. What happens on our side is that we are providing opportunities to rebuild with housing, economic help, social, etc. But we add the incentive for people to live alongside other ethnic groups, and we're not forcing them to forcing them to like move in with these people quickly. Realize this, we're literally in a rush to help these people in this country have new houses because literally their houses have been destroyed. They've been forced to move out during these conflicts, and both opposition benches keep bringing about there's going to be this generational trauma when you move in these people with other ethnic groups post-conflict, but they don't explain why we can't help push away why on their side they can get rid of the discriminative sentiments in the long run from these families, or on their side, how are these minority groups, they will not become victims to hate in the future. When you are stuck in your own bubble after such a conflict, you'll be stuck with what you want to believe and what you only know. When you are mixed in with different communities, you are open to new perspectives and understand where these others will come from. This teaches you in the long run to be more accepting and long term compared to compared to like you only thinking like just ruminating in your own bubble and thinking that everything that has happened has because of this and that, and probably because of these ethnic groups, which has not the case. Okay, so what is the weighing on this? First of all, the gravity. We want to emphasize how the process of creating these mixed race houses can prevent the worst discrimination and stigma between ethnic groups in the long run. By exposing them to one another, they will be socially and culturally integrated and get rid of that generational hate towards these other ethnic groups, not only in small groups, but as communities as a whole. Realize this, mixed housings everywhere, mixed ethnic groups are mingling together. They're going to be growing up together. You make them see each other every single day. They will be culturally integrated, socially integrated to the point that they understand each other. They feel like, and that builds the community, and that gets rid of the discrimination that can happen to them in the long run. Second of all, vulnerability. Ethnic minorities become vulnerable actors in these conflicts. They become scapegoats and receive worse discrimination and can even lose their opportunities in life. When we push for these mixed housings post-conflict, we provide them with better public facilities that usually exist in these majority residentials. We provide them with the chance to economically collaborate with each other. It's important to lessen economic jealousy and economic discrimination and lessen the fresh tension towards these minorities overall. And then the check and balance. Ethnic minorities become the check and balance to prevent further political polarization in these bubbles, as I said before, by inserting their point of view into the discourse, by choosing a less extreme politicians to represent the districts. This is important because we prevent further extreme politicians like adding gas to the fire or trying to pit them against one another or making these groups the scapegoat. We also provide an inherently better check and balance by placing these minorities in the politicians' area elections. And we're the only team that talks about enough analysis, economic, political, and social for to propose.
Tapi di depan skor 5% biasanya. Okay, thank you. To close the Novice Grand Final up with.
Hello, check. Hello.
Yes, audible.
Hello, does my voice sounds audible? I'm sorry, I don't hear anything from you. I think my internet is. Hold on a minute. All right, does my voice sound audible now? Hello. Okay.
Yes, you're audible.
All right. Sorry, I will. First thing first, I just wanted to say that anything I will say in this debate are not reflecting who I am as a person, and this is a very sensitive debate. So whatever I'm saying is not reflecting who I am. I just wanted to make that clear. And then the POI preference, I have differ from my first speaker. If you wanted to do POI, well, just click that raise hand button. If there are time, I will try to accept your POI. First thing first, let me rearrange my faces. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. All right, judges, government benches argument are too idealistic on their word and does not touch any reality and give any realization or contextualization to what happens to a post-conflict states. First thing first, let's start to say how the OCG are playing this debate today and what are their premises on this debate today. First thing first, they're trying to say that this will create an erasing intergenerational trauma. Judges, I have two responses in this case. A, judges, trauma live in memory, stories, and identity. Simply living in the same neighborhood wouldn't undo decades of history of violence and discrimination. I think what we can do is to let the tension being lowered naturally. At the end of the day, I think without any force by the government, the government just stay neutral and treat both of the races as citizens, then the tension will die out. Of course, it will take a long time, but it will happen nonetheless because we in the opposition are understanding the fact that healing takes time, and you cannot forcing the healing by forcing them to actually living next to each other. Judges. B, forced to live next to each other can deepen the wounds. In fact, survivors of violence might feel unsafe being placed next to former perpetrators or rival groups. This will re-traumatize rather than heal. Instead of closure, daily exposure to those triggers may reinforce fear, mistrust, passing trauma onto the next generation, etc., etc. And I think Before I'm moving on to the OG cases, I just wanted to make a clarification, one thing very clear, a very big clarification only. Justin has already said to you that segregation is needed. We're not trying to actually say that segregation is needed, but separation is needed in this case of the scenario. There are two different things, and I would like for apologize for that misplace of the words. First thing first, in the OG premises, if we are opposed to the motion, then segregation will happen. The state has mandate to not do that and to ensure the reconciliation. Judges, our response is, please understand that what we are proposing is not segregation whatsoever. Segregation is when the state actively enforces racial or ethnic separation, e.g., apartheid or in South Africa, Jim Crow laws, and etc., etc. But opposition just not. But on the opposition side, government just not enforce one to live next to each other. Communities may live apart at first because of trauma or cultural conflict, but they are free to move, mix, and cooperate as they wish. The state is neutral. It doesn't enforce separation, but it also doesn't impose forced integration, judges, because we acknowledge the fact that at the end of the day, you cannot force two of the conflicting groups to actually live next to each other, because at the end of the day, the pre-war propaganda, something like they kill your family, they kill your husband, they kill your daughters, they kill your sons, it's still there. It's still, the bad blood is still there, and we cannot force them to live next to each other. What happens when we force them to live next to each other is they will be discrimination against those who are losing in this war, or the minority in these cases. Second, integration is the core. That's what they're trying to say. Yes, but forcing them to live on the same neighborhood doesn't necessarily bring the harmony that you want, judges. Discrimination will likely happen if you force them to live on the same neighborhood whatsoever, even if maybe because of your oversight or whatever, that will be harder to get into realization. Magically will happen. We in this scenario, we can say that magically this will happen. There will never be a discrimination in this neighborhood, but there will still be a discrimination on but there will still be discrimination in school, for example, workplace, and etc., etc. So in your world, this kind of thing that you talk about will never get implemented or being realization into this motion right now, to this work. I think with that, you can see how much we in the opposition bench are far more superior on our argumentation than our government bench. Let's jump into my argumentation. First, why are we opposing this motion? Principally, we can see the motion stated that in this current war, we are living in a post-conflict state, judges. Which means these different races and different people are still have a bad blood against each other. I think what will be likely to happen, which is ironic, as I think the government purpose of implementing this motion is to erase all forms of discrimination, but in reality, this motion will likely increase the violence and discrimination one will face against another because of this history of past conflict that's still new and recent to each side of both sides. Why this would likely to happen? The conflict is still new, so the bad blood is still there. Both sides still being succumbed by the early propaganda during the war and still does not like each other. Post-conflict societies are fragile, judges. Sudden forced integration has the bigger possibility to reignite hostilities, judges. Allowing communities to heal internally first, foster stronger in-group stability, making eventual cross-group dialogue more genuine and sustainable, judges. Integration by choice carries more legitimacy than by policy mandate, by the government forcing them to do that. The interest of the government is fiat in this debate, judges, and that is to establish the state right. I do think their interest will not only not get protected, but will get harmed because of this kind of policy. And then what will be the impact if we are opposing this motion, judges? First, reducing the possibility and risk of renewed conflict. Thus, will defending and protect the interest and purpose of the government itself for wanting to stabilize after the post-conflict, judges. Let's say that if you are living next to your neighborhood, the next person that you live in is the reason for you to lose your family, and etc., etc. There will be a bad blood, right? And there will be some form of discrimination that will happen, judges. We are wanting to reduce the possibility of this because of the fragile peace that just happens in the state of the post-conflict war, judges. First, judges. And then why this will happen? First, trust is built through time, judges, dialogue and shared experiences, not government mandate, judges. If group feels integration is being imposed, they may comply externally, but harbor deep resentment internally, making true reconciliation never to actually become a possibility. Two, by contrast, organic reconciliation means when groups choose to interact, they are doing so out of willingness, not coercion, which makes the trust genuine. The healing takes time, trained judges, and we cannot force them by actually forcing them to live next to each other. And then let's see what is the best case and the worst case scenario in this government. Government will tell you that in their best case, mixed-race housing policy magically integrate communities. People live side by side, tolerance grow. But let's be real, living next door does not erase trauma. At best, they achieve shallow coexistence, fragile and prone to collapse the moment tensions flare. And even in this picture, we could have reached integration more safely through schools, workplace, and cultural exchanges without the risk of forced housing. Now, let's be honest about our worst case. Suppose community remain separated for a while. People stick to their enclave, reconciliation is slower, and the integration doesn't happen overnight. But even then, they are at peace. Stability holds. They can heal in safely, and over time, natural and voluntary cooperation emerges in market, social, and public life. That reconciliation is genuine and sustainable, and not coerced, and not forcing, and not fake like the government wanted. And that's why I think we are proud to be opposing this motion today, and that's why we are winning in the opposition side. Thank you.
So that marks the end of the Novice Grand Final of NOVED 2025. Congratulations for all 4 teams for making it this far. Regardless of the result, all of you should